I met Emily on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, the kind where your socks get wet and everything smells like concrete and coffee. I was at a bookstore downtown, waiting out the weather. She was crouched near the travel section, thumbing through a guide to Florence. I made some half-baked comment about never seeing the city myself but always wanting to go. She smiled, wide, bright, and replied, "Then you should. Don't wait too long." That was her in a nutshell, gentle, certain, and always nudging life forward. We got coffee at the corner cafe next to the store, and what was supposed to be 10 minutes turned into nearly 2 hours. We talked about everything from childhood road trips to the worst movies we'd ever paid to see. I didn't want to say goodbye. When we finally parted ways, I remember walking down the street with this odd, quiet certainty that something big had just started. We started dating the following week. She lived in a studio apartment with plants in every window and mismatched mugs stacked 3 deep in her cabinet. I loved how easily she laughed, how she made small things feel like events, a Tuesday dinner, a Sunday grocery run. By the end of that year, we were sharing a lease. A year later, we were engaged. Our wedding was in late spring, outdoors at a family friend's vineyard. The whole day felt like a dream, sun-dappled tables, laughter echoing off the hills, her in a simple white dress with a crown of flowers and this look in her eyes that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. We honeymooned in Canada, driving through the Rockies, eating too much, taking pictures of everything. We settled into married life smoothly. I was working in IT consulting, and she managed communications for a local nonprofit. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house on a quiet street lined with maple trees and old neighbors who waved every time you drove past. Weekends were for farmers markets and bike rides and long breakfasts in our sunny little kitchen. 3 years in, we welcomed our daughter, Nora. She had Emily's hazel eyes and a set of lungs that could startle the dog 2 houses down. Parenthood was exhausting and amazing in equal measure. Diaper changes at 3 a.m. were balanced by Nora's infectious giggle and the way she'd curl her tiny hand around your finger like she never wanted to let go. A few years later came Liam, our wild child. Born with a shock of dark hair and a grin that never seemed to quit. He was a climber from the start, crib rails, counters, my back if I ever sat still long enough. He and Nora were thick as thieves, always plotting something, always filling the house with chaos and joy. Life was busy. Loud. Sometimes messy. But it was ours, and it was good. We had routines that grounded us, movie nights, backyard barbecues, bedtime stories where I did all the voices. I never once doubted that we were happy. That I was exactly where I was supposed to be. There's a kind of magic in the ordinary, and I think we lived in that space better than most. Our mornings followed a rhythm. I'd wake up just before 6, brew the coffee, and sit by the window with a book while the sun came up. Emily would pad down the stairs 20 minutes later in one of my old t-shirts, hair in a loose bun, rubbing her eyes like a sleepy kid. We never talked much in the mornings, just exchanged small smiles and a brush of hands as I passed her a mug. It was our way of easing into the day. The kids would thunder down next, Nora always in a rush, Liam always forgetting socks. Breakfasts were a chaotic blur of toast, spilled cereal, missing homework, and last-minute hair fixes. But somehow, we always got everyone out the door. I worked from an office about 20 minutes away. Emily mostly worked from home or took calls from her little nook upstairs. Her calendar was filled with community events and school fundraisers, and somehow, she made it all look easy. What I loved most were the small rituals. Friday nights were homemade pizza and whatever movie the kids picked. Saturdays started slow, we let the kids climb into bed with us, and they'd take turns demanding pancakes or French toast. Emily played music while she cooked, always something upbeat and old, Fleetwood Mac, the Beatles, the Supremes. The kids would dance around the kitchen barefoot, and I'd just watch, soaking it all in. Sundays were for the park. Liam insisted on bringing a soccer ball every time. Nora preferred the swings. Emily packed snacks in a worn-out tote bag she'd had since college, and we'd stay out until someone complained about the sun or skinned a knee. Sometimes, we'd stop for ice cream on the way home. The kids always picked the messiest flavors: blue bubblegum for Liam, rainbow sherbet for Nora. Emily and I always shared a chocolate-dipped cone, no matter what. Evenings were calmer. After dinner and baths, the kids would get their 30 minutes of screen time while Emily and I cleaned up. We had this unspoken dance in the kitchen: she washed, I dried. We talked about the day. Nothing big. Just notes from work, funny things the kids said, little updates from her side of the family. Then came story time, and we alternated who read. The kids always begged for her to read because she did the voices better. I didn't mind. After they were in bed, we had an hour or two for just us. Sometimes we watched a show, sometimes we sat on the porch with a glass of wine. Sometimes we just lay side by side in comfortable silence, each reading our own book. It was the kind of quiet that only comes when you're fully at ease with someone. I never took any of it for granted. I loved being a husband, a father. I loved the life we built. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind you see in movies. But it was solid. Full. And real. One of the things I loved most about our life was how much joy we found in the little things. I think that's what made our house feel like more than a building. It wasn't just where we lived, it was where everything that mattered actually happened. Emily had a green thumb. Not just good with plants, she had this almost magical ability to bring anything to life. Our backyard looked like something out of a gardening catalog. She kept a small vegetable patch, some climbing roses along the fence, and a whole bed of wildflowers that changed colors with the seasons. I built her a wooden bench under the maple tree one summer. She'd sit out there in the morning sometimes, coffee in hand, toes buried in the grass, a paperback cracked open across her lap. Inside the house, she had a knack for making things feel intentional. Not in a designer way, more like every object had a story. The ceramic bowl by the front door was from our trip to Santa Fe. The framed photo of the kids at the lake cabin sat next to the crooked little sculpture Liam made in preschool. Even our mismatched kitchen chairs felt like they belonged to us. Nora was always drawing. She'd cover the dining room table with paper, pens, markers, and bits of ribbon. Every few days, we'd find another gallery of her artwork taped to the fridge or lining the hallway. Emily encouraged it with quiet enthusiasm, never trying to steer her, just letting her create. Liam, on the other hand, was all energy. He wanted to take things apart, see how they worked, build them again differently. He was only 6 but already had a box labeled "Inventions" under his bed, full of wires, bottle caps, rubber bands, and stray screws. We were a team. That's how it always felt. When one of us was tired, the other stepped up. When one kid got sick, we juggled it together. When something went wrong with the plumbing or the car or the bills, we handled it. Not perfectly, not always smoothly, but with a kind of shared momentum, like we knew we had each other's backs. Every once in a while, Emily and I would have a quiet dinner after the kids went to bed. We'd light a few candles, open a bottle of wine, and just talk like we used to before life got noisy. She'd tell me about something funny one of her coworkers said, or about a kid at school who hugged her leg during a fundraiser. I'd update her on the tech issues I was dealing with at work or complain about traffic on I-94. It didn't matter what we talked about. We were just happy to be talking. It wasn't glamorous. But it was ours. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching her when she didn't know, humming while folding laundry, dancing in the hallway with Liam, crouched down to tie Nora's shoe. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the good life. Right here, in front of me. If there's one thing I wish I could bottle up and keep forever, it's the feeling we had in those middle years. Everything just clicked. We weren't newlyweds anymore, and the kids were past the stage of diapers and tantrums. We had found a rhythm that worked, one that made the house feel alive but manageable. Our life had a steady beat. Emily had started volunteering more at the kids' school, especially during the fall carnival and spring book fair. She had this way of organizing chaos without making it feel like work. The teachers loved her, the kids followed her around like ducklings, and even the other parents, some of whom could be a bit territorial, gravitated toward her calm energy. I took more time off around the holidays and birthdays. We always made a big deal out of those, but not in the extravagant sense. It was more about making it meaningful. For Nora's 8th birthday, we turned the backyard into a fairy garden, string lights, paper lanterns, little DIY wings for all the kids. Emily stayed up late the night before making wands out of chopsticks and ribbon. I grilled burgers and wore a crown Nora made out of aluminum foil and glitter glue. The kids thought it was hilarious. Liam wanted a space theme the next year, so we transformed the garage into a rocket ship command center. Emily painted cardboard panels with knobs and buttons. I set up an old projector to show stars on the ceiling. We stayed up late that night after the party, just the two of us, sitting on lawn chairs in the driveway while the kids fell asleep. We were both exhausted, but I remember thinking I wouldn't trade this life for anything. Vacations were simple, weekends at the lake, road trips to visit family in Minnesota, the occasional week-long beach stay in Michigan. We weren't globetrotters, but we didn't need to be. We played card games in cheap motel rooms, roasted marshmallows over fire pits, let the kids pick the music and sing until their voices gave out. Emily always brought a separate bag full of snacks, sunscreen, wipes, and band-aids, just in case. She was the kind of prepared that made everything feel effortless. We had couple friends, too. Dinners with neighbors, camping trips with families from school, the occasional double date downtown. Emily had a group of moms she met for brunch every other Sunday, and I had my Wednesday night basketball games at the community center. We gave each other space, and somehow that space made us closer. There was trust. Not just the surface kind, but the deep, rooted kind you build one shared experience at a time. At night, when the house was quiet, I sometimes lay awake listening to Emily breathe beside me, and I'd think about how far we'd come. From that bookstore on a rainy day to this full, vibrant life with two incredible kids, a home we made from scratch, and memories spilling out of every room. We were happy. I was certain. It started small. So small I barely registered it. Emily had taken on a new committee project at the school, a parent-led initiative to revamp the school's arts program. It wasn't unusual. She thrived on things like that. But this time, something about the way she threw herself into it felt different. She was gone more often in the evenings, out at meetings, planning sessions, school board discussions. I didn't think much of it at first. If anything, I admired how committed she was. The program meant a lot to her, and I was proud of how much she was contributing. But then the calendar on the fridge started filling up fast. She was out of the house 3 or 4 nights a week, sometimes more. Always for planning. Sometimes she'd come home later than expected, slipping in quietly, already in her pajamas. I'd ask how the meeting went and she'd say, productive, or long, or just fine. No big red flags. Just less. I noticed she wasn't around for the bedtime routine as often. That was usually her favorite part of the day, reading to Liam while Nora braided her hair, the way she'd sneak back in after lights out to kiss them both one more time. It didn't stop completely, but it happened less. And when I mentioned it gently one night, she just smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "I know, I miss it too. Just for a little while, okay?" So I let it go. One Friday, she mentioned a weekend retreat the committee was planning, a day-long thing at a nearby nature center to go over their presentation plan. "It'll be boring, trust me," she said, laughing as she packed trail mix and a water bottle. "Flip charts and schedules. Nothing you'd be jealous of." And I wasn't. I trusted her. We'd been through so much together that it never crossed my mind to question any of it. I had my own stuff going on, work had gotten busier, Nora had started dance classes, Liam was in soccer. Life had picked up speed, and we were both just keeping pace. But there were moments that stuck out, not because they were dramatic, but because they felt just slightly off. Like the way she forgot about our dinner with the Martins, even though she'd been the one who scheduled it. Or how she left her phone in the car overnight, which she never used to do. Or how she stopped using our shared calendar app and started handwriting her schedule on a pad she kept in her tote bag. I chalked it all up to stress. Overcommitment. Maybe even burnout. It wasn't like Emily to stretch herself thin, but I figured maybe this project was just more intense than the others. Still, for the first time in years, I started to feel like we were slightly out of sync. Not broken. Just, not moving at the same tempo. Like a song where one of the instruments starts drifting half a beat behind. You don't notice it right away. But when you do, you can't unhear it. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel suspicious. Just, a little left out. A little more alone in the spaces we used to fill together. But these things pass, I told myself. They always do. I don't think there was a single moment when it all changed. It was more like waking up one morning and realizing the air in the house felt different. Emily was still herself, on the surface. She still made Nora's lunches with little notes tucked inside. She still bought Liam's favorite waffles and reminded him to wear sunscreen on field day. But something between us had shifted, like we were walking parallel paths instead of one shared road. It was the small things that began to pile up. She used to hum while cooking, little bits of songs she had stuck in her head. Now the kitchen was silent, even when she was in it. We still talked, but more in updates than conversations. Did you see the field trip form? Can you grab milk tomorrow? Liam has a dentist appointment Friday. We hadn't had a real, long, drifting conversation in weeks. I tried to bridge the gap. One night, after the kids were in bed, I suggested we have a movie night, just us, like we used to. She smiled and said she was tired, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow turned into another meeting. Then another. One Saturday morning, she left early for a project meeting, and I took the kids to the museum downtown. We had a great time. Liam lost his mind over the dinosaur exhibit. Nora spent 20 minutes sketching a replica of a Greek statue in her notebook. When we got back, Emily was already home. She was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, staring out at nothing. I kissed her on the cheek and started telling her about the kids' favorite exhibits, but her responses felt delayed, distant. She smiled, nodded, said all the right things, but she wasn't there with me. Later that night, I lay awake while she slept. I watched the ceiling fan spin and tried to put a name to the feeling that had crept into my chest. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It wasn't anger, either. Just, uncertainty. An itch I couldn't quite reach. A sense that I was missing something, but not knowing what. I wondered if she was just burned out. She had taken on so much lately, school committee, work, kids. Maybe it was just emotional fatigue. Or maybe it was me. Maybe I hadn't been present enough, hadn't noticed the toll it was taking soon enough. I started thinking about ways to reconnect. A weekend away, just the two of us. A surprise date night. Something to remind us of the version of ourselves that used to talk for hours and get lost in the sound of each other's voice. So I made plans. I found a cabin just outside Door County, a place we'd always said we'd go but never had. I booked it for the following month, asked her to block the weekend. She seemed surprised but said yes. I felt hopeful for the first time in weeks. But the very next day, she told me she might have a scheduling conflict. Something with the committee, or work, she wasn't sure yet. She said she'd check and get back to me. She never did. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one Thursday night, staring at my phone while Emily finished loading the dishwasher. We hadn't said much all evening. The kids had gone to bed after a movie. We cleaned up, moved around each other like coworkers on autopilot. When she finally closed the dishwasher door and started drying her hands, I asked, "Everything okay?" She paused for half a second too long. "Yeah," she said. "Just tired. It's been a long week." It was the kind of answer that should have been enough. But it wasn't. Not anymore. I nodded, tried to meet her eyes. She looked past me, toward the hallway. "I'm going to read for a bit," she added, already walking away. I watched her go, and for the first time, I realized I didn't remember the last time she touched me, really touched me. Not the quick goodbye kiss, not the perfunctory shoulder squeeze in front of the kids. I meant a lingering touch. A hand resting on mine, fingers through my hair, her arms around me at night. That quiet intimacy we used to have so easily. When had it disappeared? I started noticing other things, too. Things I had probably been dismissing. She had started locking her phone more frequently, even at home. Her laptop, once left open on the kitchen counter, was now always closed and tucked into her tote. One night, she got a call after 11. She stepped outside to take it, said it was someone from the committee, and when she came back in, she didn't mention it again. It wasn't about jealousy. I wasn't picturing anything. I just felt shut out. Like I was no longer in the same room emotionally, no matter how physically close we were. One evening, we were brushing our teeth in silence. She spit, wiped her mouth, and turned to leave. I asked her, "Do you think we're still okay?" My voice barely above a whisper. She blinked, clearly startled. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. We just feel off. You and me." She gave a small, tired smile. "We're just in a weird season. It'll pass." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted that to be true. I nodded, didn't press it further. That night, I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling. I could hear her breathing, steady and slow. I couldn't tell if she was asleep or pretending. There was once a time I would have known the difference without even looking. In the days that followed, I told myself to be patient. That every couple hits patches like this. That we were just busy. But a seed had been planted, and it started to grow roots I couldn't ignore. One morning, I got to work and realized I couldn't remember if we'd said goodbye. I sat in my car longer than I needed to, trying to replay the morning in my head. I saw Nora's messy ponytail, Liam's half-eaten toast, the dog barking at the mail truck. But Emily? I couldn't remember if she kissed me or even looked at me. It was a quiet ache. A shadow that followed me. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt like a guest in my own life. The weekend we were supposed to go to Door County came and went. She told me the committee meeting had been rescheduled last minute and she just couldn't miss it. I nodded, trying not to show how much that hurt. I took the kids out of town anyway, just the three of us. We played mini-golf, ate way too much ice cream, and stayed up watching cartoons in a hotel bed that smelled like old air freshener. I smiled a lot that weekend, but every smile felt like it was held up by pins. When we got back Sunday evening, Emily was waiting. She hugged the kids, asked how the trip was, and listened with a smile as they recounted every detail. But she barely looked at me. And when I kissed her cheek in the kitchen, she flinched, just slightly, just enough. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey, staring at the same dark corner of the ceiling for almost an hour. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. But I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. Something had shifted. Something real. And I was no longer just imagining it. I still wasn't thinking about infidelity. That never even crossed my mind. Maybe she was depressed. Maybe she was falling out of love. Maybe I had been so wrapped up in work and the kids that I hadn't noticed her needs changing. I was desperate for a reason that made sense. The next morning, my mom called. She asked if she could stop by to drop off some books for Nora. I said sure. She showed up mid-morning, just as Emily was leaving for another meeting. Emily barely spoke to her, offered a tight smile, then left in a rush. Once the door shut, my mom turned to me. "I need to talk to you," she said. Something in her voice made my stomach twist. She sat on the couch and clasped her hands in her lap. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. I've been going back and forth all morning. I sat across from her, suddenly wide awake. I saw Emily yesterday. At the Riverside Cafe. I wasn't spying, I just happened to be walking back from the florist. I waited. She wasn't alone, she continued. She was with someone, close. Too close. I frowned. Someone from the school. She shook her head slowly, her expression tight. "It was your father." The words didn't register at first. I blinked. "What?" She looked me in the eyes. "I know what I saw." "No," I said, too quickly. You're wrong." "I wish I was," she said softly. They were sitting in a corner booth. He was touching her hand across the table. Then she leaned over and kissed his cheek. And he smiled in that way he used to smile when he thought no one else was watching. I stood up, suddenly needing air. My body felt like it had gone cold from the inside out. "She saw me," my mother added. She turned pale. He did too. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. They left right after. He didn't even come home last night. I stared at the wall, heart pounding, my ears filled with a high, tight ringing. It couldn't be true. It just couldn't. But in my gut, I already knew. I didn't tell the kids. Not yet. I couldn't say the words out loud. Hell, I still hadn't said them to myself. But once my mother left that day, eyes glassy, hands shaking, I sat in the silence of our home for a long time, the truth unraveling around me like smoke in a sealed room. Emily came home later than usual. She walked in like nothing had happened, kissed the kids on their heads, asked if we'd all eaten. I stood there in the kitchen, barely breathing, and she smiled at me, genuinely, like she had something good to hide behind. I didn't say a word. Not that night. Not the next morning. I watched. I waited. I let the silence hang between us while I started pulling threads. I spent the next few days gathering every detail. I called in sick from work, sent the kids to my sister's house for the weekend, and dug into everything I'd once trusted blindly. Our shared accounts. Her calendar. I checked the GPS history on her car. I traced time stamps. I reviewed text logs. I logged into the security app for our doorbell camera and looked through every motion alert I'd ignored for months. What I found didn't just confirm it, it humiliated me. They'd been meeting in daylight. She had brought him into my home while I was away with the kids. The man who raised me. The man who gave me his name. My father. And her. My wife. The woman who once cried in my arms during labor. The mother of my children. Kissing my father on our couch, smiling like they had earned this. When I finally called my father, he didn't answer. He texted me 2 hours later, "Can we talk soon? I think it's time." No apology. No shame. Just, "It's time." I didn't respond. Instead, I called my lawyer. Emily was served divorce papers 2 days later. I didn't give her a warning. No letter. No argument. She came home to find the envelope sitting on the dining table with her name typed cleanly across the top. I watched her read it from the hallway. Her face went white. Then red. "What is this?" she asked. "You know exactly what it is." She swallowed, but didn't deny it. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Please don't do this here. Not in front of the kids. They're at my sister's." She stepped closer, desperate. We can fix this. With my father, Emily. She froze. I walked past her, out the front door, and into the driveway where my mother was waiting in the car. She didn't want to come inside. She hadn't spoken to my father since that day at the cafe. After I told her what I had confirmed, she packed his things and left them on the porch. She'd spent 43 years with him. She told me, in a tone that was more steel than grief, he can figure out where to sleep tonight. I dropped Emily's key off at the lawyer's office the next morning. I'd changed the locks. She wasn't coming back here. The house was mine, I'd be damned if they made it their playground again. The worst part? I still had to finish paying off the mortgage. I'd built this home. Now I had to sleep in it, carry its weight, while she tried to pretend she hadn't lit the whole damn thing on fire. But I wasn't done. Revenge isn't always loud. It doesn't have to be violent or cruel. Sometimes it's just about making sure they lose everything they took for granted. The first thing I did was make sure everyone knew. Emily had spent years crafting this image of herself, the ideal mom, the kind committee volunteer, the smiling neighbor. So I let the truth out, piece by piece. Not through gossip, through documentation. Screenshots. Timeline breakdowns. A private conversation with the school principal, politely explaining why she would no longer be volunteering. A call to her boss, she had used her flexible hours to host him in our home. She was let go within a week. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I was simply done covering for her. My father moved in with a cousin 2 towns over. He tried calling me twice. I never answered. My mother filed for divorce a week after I filed mine. 43 years together, and she kicked him out with nothing but a bag and a toothbrush. I didn't cry for him. I didn't even get angry anymore. I just deleted his number and removed every photo of him from our home. Emily begged to come back. Not because she loved me, because her safety net was gone. My mother wanted nothing to do with her. Her own parents were out of state and barely involved in her life anymore. Friends disappeared when they heard the truth. Most of them had known us as a couple. They weren't going to stand beside her after that. She asked to stay at the house for the kids. I said no. She said she couldn't afford a place on her own. I reminded her the affair voided her rights to alimony. She started crying, telling me she had made a mistake. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just looked her in the eyes and said, it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And now you get to live with it. My lawyer handled the rest. I pushed for a fast-track divorce with full custody of the kids. We reached a settlement. I would continue paying the mortgage until the end of the year, and then the house would be sold, with me retaining primary custody. She got what little she had left in her name. No spousal support. No access to shared accounts. I even had the locks changed again after I found out she tried using her old key while I was away. The cameras caught it. My lawyer filed a formal notice that any further unauthorized entry would be considered trespassing. And as a final insult, I listed the house on the market 2 days before her birthday. I walked through it room by room, took one last look at the life we'd built, and then burned it from the foundation up, not with fire, but with paperwork and signatures. The home she had once ruled. Gone. The man she thought would always be her backup plan. Erased. It's strange how silence can feel different after the dust settles. At first, it was deafening, this absence where her voice used to be, where our routines used to live. Now, it's just quiet. And I like it. The house sold faster than I expected. A young couple bought it. They walked through with wide eyes, holding hands like Emily and I used to, before life turned. I left behind the built-in bookshelves and the garden Emily planted. I kept nothing else. No photos. No reminders. Just the clothes on my back, my kids, and the version of myself I refused to lose. We moved into a smaller place across town. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours. The kids adjusted quicker than I thought they would. Children have a way of absorbing change without letting it wreck them. Nora put up her artwork on the fridge. Liam turned the closet under the stairs into his secret lab. I bought a second-hand couch and a kitchen table that doesn't wobble. Piece by piece, we're rebuilding a life. And this one? It's honest. Emily sees the kids every other weekend. That was the arrangement. She's civil. Careful. Sometimes she looks at me like she wants to say something, some plea, some memory, some leftover piece of love she's trying to make matter. But I don't give her the opening. I'm not cruel. I'm just done. My mother moved into a condo near the lake. She's lighter now, like someone took a weight off her back she didn't even know she was carrying. We don't talk about my father. I haven't spoken to him since the day he betrayed both of us. And I won't. People say betrayal changes you. That's true. But not always in the way you expect. I'm not colder. I'm not bitter. I'm just sharper now. More awake. I pay attention to the silences. To the little lies people let slip. But I also see the good clearer, the people who stay. The ones who show up. I started running again. Not to get away from anything, but to move towards something new. I don't know what it is yet. Maybe just peace. I've thought a lot about forgiveness. Everyone seems to think it's the finish line. But I don't owe them that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness is a gift, not a requirement. And right now, I'm keeping it for myself. The truth is, I loved her. I loved him, too, in a way only sons can love their fathers, complicated, deep, and always wanting to make them proud. And they ruined that. They set fire to something sacred and expected to find a way back from the ashes. There is no way back. But there is forward. And I'm already walking it.